The notification buzzed on my phone as I sat sipping my morning coffee. I hesitated before picking it up, already half knowing who it was. Sure enough, Amy's name glared at me from the screen, the little text preview revealing the opening salvo. "Hey, just heard about the family vacation plans." My stomach sank. I tapped the notification reluctantly and read the rest. "So excited about the lake house. Can't wait to unwind. By the way, I'll need you to keep an eye on the kids for a few nights. Jeff and I could use a little time to ourselves. You don't mind, right?" My hand tightened around the phone. The words sat there, glowing innocently enough, but they felt like a demand. Not a question, not a favor, a foregone conclusion. I typed a reply, careful to sound neutral. "Hey, that's great about the lake house. I'm really looking forward to it, but I don't think I'll be able to babysit. I need a break too." Her reply came faster than I expected. "Come on, Rachel. You know how hard it is for us. Jeff and I never get a break. Just a few nights. It's not like I'm asking for much. Don't be like this." I took a deep breath and put the phone down. It was too early for this. I let the message sit unanswered, hoping she'd take the hint and let it go. But of course, she didn't. By noon, Mom called. "Hi, honey. Amy mentioned you might not be helping with the kids on vacation. Is that true?" Her voice was laced with the kind of disappointment only a mother could perfect. "Mom, I wasn't even asked," I said, already feeling cornered. "Well, Amy and Jeff really need this. You know how much they've been struggling. It's not a big deal, Rachel. You're so good with the kids. Why make this harder than it has to be?" The words hit a nerve. "Why is it always me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Why can't you or Dad help? Or Jeff, for that matter?" Mom sighed, her patience visibly draining over the phone. "Rachel, don't make this a thing. Family is about stepping up when you're needed. Can't you just be a little flexible?" For Amy, I didn't bother responding. I knew from experience that flexible was code for do as you're told. The week before the trip was a blur of dodging texts, increasingly passive-aggressive phone calls, and long, exasperated rants to my best friend, Chloe. Why is it my job to cater to Amy's life choices? I fumed during one of our nightly calls. She had 3 kids. That was her decision, not mine. Chloe chuckled on the other end. Classic Amy. Just stand your ground. If they want a babysitter, they can hire one. That's the plan, I muttered. But my resolve wavered as the trip loomed closer. I knew Amy wouldn't drop this easily, and the thought of spending a week in close quarters with her relentless guilt trips made my skin crawl. When I finally pulled up to the lake house, the first thing I noticed was how perfect it looked. A sprawling log cabin perched on a hill, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. The second thing I noticed was Amy, standing on the porch with a clipboard in hand. Her expression was a mix of triumph and thinly veiled impatience, as if she'd been waiting all day for me to arrive just so she could start in on me. "Hey, sis," she called, waving as I climbed out of the car. The kids spilled out behind her, Toby, Emma, and Mia all shouting over each other about who got which room. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile as I approached. Amy barely waited for me to set down my bags before launching in. "So, Jeff and I were thinking of heading into town tonight. There's this adorable little wine bar. Could you watch the kids for a couple of hours?" I blinked. She didn't even bother easing into it. "Amy, we talked about this. I'm not here to babysit." Her smile faltered, replaced by the familiar mask of wounded disbelief. "Seriously, Rachel? You're really going to do this? It's just a couple of hours. Jeff and I need this." "What you need," I said, struggling to keep my tone calm, "is to ask for help ahead of time instead of springing this on me at the last minute." "Unbelievable," she snapped, her voice rising. "You're being selfish, Rachel. I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this." And there it was, the same tired script. My refusal was painted as some grand betrayal of family values, while Amy positioned herself as the martyr. I knew this routine by heart. "I'm not being selfish," I said, my voice firmer now. "I just want to enjoy the vacation like everyone else. Why can't Mom or Dad help?" Because they're old, Rachel, she hissed, her temper flaring. And Jeff's been working nonstop. You don't understand because you don't have kids. The word stung, but I didn't let it show. You're right. I don't have kids. That's why they're not my responsibility. Her jaw tightened, her face turning red with anger. Before she could respond, the front door swung open, and Mom appeared, frowning. What's going on here? She asked, her tone sharp. Amy wants me to watch the kids tonight, I explained, keeping my voice measured. I said no. Mom's gaze darted between us, her disapproval settling squarely on me. Rachel, can't you just help out? It's not that big of an ask. I laughed, bitter and humorless. Of course, let's all gang up on Rachel. That's how this works, right? That's not fair, Mom began, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and walked down to the dock, leaving them behind. The lake shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its surface smooth and undisturbed. I sat at the edge of the dock, letting the quiet calm my nerves. But my peace was short-lived. Footsteps approached behind me, and I didn't need to turn to know it was Amy. I'm sorry, she said quietly, sitting beside me. I didn't respond. I shouldn't have called you selfish, she continued. It's just, things have been hard lately, with Jeff, and the kids, and Mom and Dad. Her voice cracked, and I turned to look at her. She wasn't crying. Amy never cried, but the strain was visible in the tight set of her jaw and the way her hands fidgeted in her lap. What's going on? I asked, my anger softening despite myself. She hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing. Forget it. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it, simmering beneath the surface. Whatever it wasn't going to stay buried for long. The morning sun poured through the cabin's large windows, but the warmth did little to dissolve the tension left over from the night before. Amy avoided me at breakfast, keeping her attention on the kids while Jeff scrolled through his phone, sipping his coffee in silence. Mom and Dad tried to fill the awkwardness with forced cheer, rattling off plans for the day. Boating, a hike, maybe some fishing, but no one seemed particularly enthused. I took my coffee out to the deck, hoping for some quiet. The lake was glassy and calm, the kind of serene view that made you forget, for a moment, all the nonsense waiting behind you. But the moment didn't last. Mind if I join you? Jeff's voice cut through the stillness. I turned to see him stepping out onto the deck, his mug in hand. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by a heaviness that made me wary. Sure, I said, gesturing to the chair next to mine. He sat down with a sigh, staring out at the water. For a while, we just sat in silence, the only sound the faint rustling of trees in the breeze. I heard about the fight, he said finally, his tone neutral. Which one? I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. He let out a short laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Fair point, but I meant you and Amy. I didn't respond. What was there to say? You know, he continued, she's been struggling more than usual. Jeff, I didn't come here to be her therapist, I said, my patience fraying. I know, he said quickly. I'm not saying it's your job. I just think, maybe you don't see how hard she's trying. The words caught me off guard. Jeff wasn't exactly known for defending Amy, or anyone, for that matter. But there was something in his voice, a weariness that felt different this time. She's always trying to prove something, he said, staring into his coffee. To you, to your parents, to me. But it's like no matter what she does, it's never enough. And I'm not saying that's fair to you, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. I frowned, trying to reconcile his words with the Amy I knew. The bossy, self-assured sister who always seemed to have everything under control. But Jeff's version of her, desperate for approval, perpetually falling short, felt unfamiliar. And yet it made a strange kind of sense. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs drew our attention. Dad appeared in the doorway, his face set in an expression I couldn't quite read. Jeff, he said, his voice low. We need to talk. Jeff glanced at me, then back at Dad. "What's up?" "Inside," Dad said curtly, nodding toward the living room. Jeff sighed and got up, leaving his coffee mug on the table. I watched them disappear into the house, unease settling in my chest. Something was going on, something bigger than the usual family drama. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Not 10 minutes later, raised voices erupted from the living room. I couldn't make out every word, but it was enough to know the conversation had gone south fast. Amy's voice joined the fray, followed by Mom's, and then Jeff's, all overlapping in a cacophony of accusations and defenses. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went inside, lingering in the hallway just out of sight. "You had no right," Jeff was shouting. "We were trying to protect everyone," Dad countered, his voice strained. "By cutting us out?" Amy's voice cracked with fury. "You didn't think we deserved to know?" Mom's voice, shaky but firm, chimed in. "We weren't cutting you out, Amy. We were trying to be fair." "Fair?" Jeff's laugh was bitter. "You think this is fair? Giving everything to Rachel?" My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" Amy demanded. "Ask them," Jeff said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Go on, Mom. Dad. Tell her about the will." A heavy silence fell. I stepped into the room, unable to stay hidden any longer. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. All eyes turned to me. Amy's face was a mixture of anger and betrayal, while Jeff looked more resigned than anything else. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, one that only deepened the pit in my stomach. "Rachel," Dad began, his tone cautious. "We were going to tell you, all of you, but we thought." "Tell us what?" I cut him off, my patience unraveling. Mom sighed, her hands wringing together. "We updated the will. To simplify things." Amy let out a sharp laugh. "Simplify? Is that what you call it?" "We left the house to Rachel," Dad said, his voice quiet but firm. "And the savings. And the shares." My knees felt weak. "What?" "It's not what it sounds like," Mom said quickly. "We just thought. Rachel's on her own. She doesn't have a family to fall back on like you do, Amy. And Jeff, you've got a good job." "Oh, spare me," Amy snapped. "This isn't about fairness. This is about control. About keeping Rachel tied to you while the rest of us fend for ourselves." "That's not true," Mom insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "We just wanted to make sure she was taken care of." "At our expense?" Jeff muttered, shaking his head. I stood frozen, my mind spinning. I didn't want their money. I didn't ask for it. But the damage was already done. "You couldn't have told us this before?" Amy demanded. "Before we all came here and pretended to be one big happy family? We didn't think it would come out like this," Dad said, his voice heavy with regret. "Well, congratulations," Amy said bitterly. "It's out now." She stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. Jeff followed a moment later, leaving Mom and Dad standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "We know," Mom said, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "I need some air," I said, turning and walking out the door. The lake was still calm, but the peace it usually brought felt unreachable. I sat on the dock, staring out at the water, trying to make sense of it all. Amy's anger, Jeff's bitterness, my parents' misguided attempts at fairness. It all swirled together in my mind, a tangled knot of hurt and resentment. And somewhere beneath it all, a single unshakable thought. This family was broken long before today. The silence on the dock was a heavy kind of relief. The house behind me seemed alive with its own turmoil, voices muffled by the thick walls but still vibrating in the air like a distant storm. I stared at the lake, trying to let its stillness seep into me, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Amy was right to be angry, Jeff too in his own way, but their anger didn't make this any less of a mess or easier to fix. "Rachel." I turned to see Amy standing at the edge of the dock, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was unreadable, which was unusual for her. Amy wore her emotions like armor, sharp and impenetrable. But now she just looked tired. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded. She lowered herself onto the dock with a quiet sigh, letting her legs dangle over the edge. For a long moment we didn't say anything. The sun was high now, glittering off the water, and I wondered how many families had come to this lake house and fallen apart under its serene beauty. "When did you know?" Amy asked finally, her voice subdued. "I didn't," I said. "Not until just now." She turned to me, her brow furrowed. "Seriously? Why would I lie about that?" Amy exhaled, her breath shaky. "I guess I thought, I don't know, that you wanted it. That you let them?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Never mind." I stared at her, trying to find the right words. "I didn't ask for this, Amy. I don't even want it." Her laugh was bitter. "Well, congratulations. You got it anyway. I'd give it to you if I could," I said honestly. That made her pause. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time in years, it felt like the wall between us had cracked, just slightly. "Why didn't they just split it?" she asked, her voice soft. "Why couldn't they just make it fair?" I didn't have an answer. "They've always done this, you know," she continued. "Played us off each other. You didn't see it because you were, quiet, doing your own thing. But I saw it. The way they pitted you, the way they babied you." Her tone wasn't cruel, but there was a rawness to it that stung. "It made me crazy, Rachel. Like I had to prove I deserved more because you were always going to get the easy sympathy." "I never asked for their pity," I said quietly. "I know," she said. "I just—" She broke off, running a hand through her hair. "I guess I hated you for it anyway, for being the one they worried about while I was— what? Fine? Strong? The one who didn't need anything." I felt a pang of guilt, the kind that comes with realizing you've been oblivious to someone else's pain. "You were always the capable one," I said. "The one who knew what she wanted and how to get it. I thought you had it all figured out." Amy let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah. Well, turns out I was just faking it." For a moment we just sat there, the weight of years pressing down on us. "Do you think it's too late?" she asked suddenly. "For what? For us? For this family? For fixing any of it?" I didn't answer right away. The honest truth was I didn't know. The damage felt so deep, so woven into the fabric of who we all were, that the idea of untangling it seemed impossible. But sitting there with Amy, the sharp edges between us softening for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of something close to hope. "I don't think it's too late," I said finally. "But it's going to take a hell of a lot of work." Amy nodded, her gaze fixed on the water. "Yeah," she said. "I guess it will." We stayed like that for a while, not saying much, just existing in the same space without the usual tension. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it felt like a beginning. By the time we went back inside, the house was quieter. Jeff was in the kitchen, half-heartedly cleaning up from breakfast, while Mom and Dad sat in the living room, their faces drawn. The tension was still there, thick and uncomfortable, but it was muted now, like everyone had run out of steam. Amy went to Jeff, murmuring something I couldn't hear, and he nodded, his expression softening slightly. I turned to Mom and Dad, unsure of what to say. They looked up at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and hope. "We're sorry," Mom said, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We just wanted to make things right." "Well," I said, crossing my arms. "You didn't." Dad winced, but he nodded. "We know," he said, "and we'll fix it. Somehow." I didn't know if I believed them, but I nodded anyway. For now, it was enough that they understood the mess they'd made. The rest of the trip passed in fits and starts. There were more conversations, some heated, some quiet, and by the time we all packed up to leave, the fractures in our family felt less like gaping wounds and more like cracks that could be mended. As I hugged Amy goodbye, she held on a little longer than usual. "Call me?" she said. "Yeah," I said. "I will." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Driving away from the lake house, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time, it felt like we were all moving in the right direction. Together. Thanks for watching. Do you agree with Rachel's choice? Comment below and subscribe for more dramatic stories.